Everybody, welcome to the Apocrypha Apocalypse. I am Gary Michuta, and here we are. Hey, it's great to see everybody. It is the Morning Chill Stream Thursdays edition. We are going to dive into some Apostolic Fathers, kind of pivoting off Justin Martyr. Going to look at a brief summary of what we did with Melito Sardis, and then we're going to talk about the Bryennios list. And so that's going to be a lot of fun, important piece of data that's, it's one of those pieces of data that's the Bryennios list. That's, what do I want to say? It's like we have so little information about it. Not really sure where it fits in the scheme of things. It could fit in a number of different slots, could be witnessing a number of different things. I'm going to lay it out for you. You guys decide, right? Like the old, what was it? Some major network used to say, we report, you decide. That's what we're going to do. We're going to report, decide. I'll give you my take on these very early documents, and I'm going to give you the overview of how I think everything fits in and give you the big picture. And we've already laid down a lot of groundwork for that, so this should be a lot of fun. So, hey, welcome aboard. Subscribe, like, hit the bell. By the way, we did cross the, 13K mark. So thank you guys. Thank you for subscribing and liking and supporting the channel. As always, you guys rock. And, the YouTube algorithm is really weird because we were struggling just to get that last 15 subs. It just ground to a halt. But you guys pushed us over the mark. Then all of a sudden, there's like 40 subs overnight. So we're like almost halfway to, 13.1K? It's weird. I don't know how YouTube works, but it's like it likes certain numbers and it doesn't like other numbers. So I don't know. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma. And anyway, welcome all. It looks like all our friends are here. The party has started, like our good friend Kainich. I think that's how you pronounce it. Welcome aboard, my friend. Great to see you. Also, Reason Belief is in the house. Thrilled and pumped to see all of you. But thrilled and pumped to see you, Reason Belief, as well. SoCal Preston, the countdown has started. I am so, talk about thrilled and pumped. I am so thrilled and pumped for the upcoming debate. Can't wait. Pens and needles. And by the way, that's going to be coming up, I believe, Saturday. So we're going to do a watch party here on the Apocrypha Apocalypse. And everybody is invited. And we're going to have a lot of fun breaking down the debate as it happens. So, SoCal, greetings, Gary and friends. Greetings, SoCal. Nice to see our friend from Paradise is Southern California is with us. Albert Mo, good morning, sir. Odd Chaldean is here as well. Yeah, thanks, Odd. Really appreciate that. You and Sam. Now I got that song in my head. Another exciting episode. Well, it depends how you define exciting. At least it's another chill stream. But I appreciate that, LaGuardia Militant. I appreciate that very much. Because I'm thrilled and pumped. It's interesting information, to say the least. I know you agree. I think lists are overrated unless they can show they thought the canon to be what it is. It's not very useful to laugh out loud. Yeah, exactly. I think lists have been used and abused in Protestant apologetics. They've just been summarily assumed that they're listing a canon, even though it's clear that these lists are special purpose list. And if you just say, hey, look, here's a list of books, it must be listing the books of the Bible that are canonical. And then, kind of fit it and shape it so that it kind of fits with the Protestant canon, but doesn't really. It's atrocious. But if you take each list, you look at it for what it is. What is the purpose? What's it supposed to be showing us? How was it used? Why did they construct it in the first place? You do a little bit of digging, you find out that, hey, these things are made for special purposes, and those special purposes help really understand the list. And when you put that all together, you find out that the whole Protestant case for the Protestant Old Testament just it evaporates because everything's based on list. And if you don't do that, what you do is you end up with list contradicting everything else the Father wrote and how he used the Deuterocanon. So it immediately causes this huge tension where our approach doesn't do that. It actually shows how everything coheres in a nice, neat way. You don't have those tensions. Did the Council of Jamnia actually happen, or is it a myth? Great question. And by the way, welcome to the channel. I don't remember seeing your name before. Ligori Militant. It's a little bit between a myth and truth. There was no Council of Jamnia. Okay, so that is the mythical part. It actually came about. I forgot who it was. I think it was Sundberg that I learned this from. He actually traced the root of this. It goes back to the Jewish philosopher Spinoza. And Spinoza wrote of the Concilium Phariseorum, the Council of the Pharisees, when he was talking about Jamnia. And when Christians saw Concilium Phariseorum, they saw concilium and they understood to mean like Catholic council. So this myth it developed around this misunderstanding of Spinoza that there was a council that the rabbis gathered together and they voted and promulgated a list like something like the North African councils. But that's totally that's fictitious. Now, what did Spinoza mean when he was talking about the Concilium Phariseorum? It wasn't a Christian council. He was talking about like an ongoing school that met in Jamnia. So that's the fact part. And the school in Jamnia did discuss the sacredness of various documents, but it never promulgated a list. And it wasn't a council like where, bishops would make their opinion known and, there'd be some sort of official declaration. It was just a bunch of discussions on the sacredness of various books. So that's what it is. It's like the council part is the myth. Jamnia is true. It was really a school that actually lasted a couple centuries and moved a few times. But yeah, thanks for that question. I don't know if we ever did we've done so many programs on this channel. I don't know if we ever did an expose on the Council of the Pharisees and the whole council myth. Sylvester, good morning from India. William would have loved that, your icon. He loves cats. Also rebutted, yep. Yeah, I mean, this Sundberg, this was debunked back in the 50s, and especially debunked by a fellow who actually isn't an academia guy. He wrote a paper as just a layperson on the Council of Jamnia and showed that there wasn't any kind of list. It was just discussions. Hey, CJ, welcome aboard. James Tay is in the house. Hey, James. My phone is dying, so be back later. No problem. That happens. The Bryennios list for sure doesn't support the Protestant canon. Yeah, it's true. I'm going to hopefully do an okay job on this. I've been trying to actually hunt down a facsimile of the Bryennios list, and I think I found it. But man, the Greek is hard to read. So I have a little picture of what I think it is, but it's really hard to match up. The script is so weird. Steve Christie basically destroyed his position by saying books laid out in the temple were by the Sadducees. Oh, you're referring to our debunking thing. By the way, guys, we were going to do part 3 of this needgod.net. He had Christie on, and Christie did his usual spiel, and we were just debunking it. Actually, it was a lot of fun with William and David and myself. We were going to have a team stream last night, but there was a little bit of a juggle with time because David lives, in Europe, and we're here in America, So it's kind of difficult figuring out the time. And then on top of that, William kind of had a minor emergency where a Catholic became Muslim. And so he and Sam Shamoun had dialogues with him. So we just decided we're going to push it to Friday because for me, today is just an incredibly busy day. So, yeah. So if you love the debunking of Christie's arguments, you'll love the finale, which God willing will be Friday. But you're right, though. Yeah, that's a dumb argument. And I think Christie thinks that all the Jews had the same collection of sacred text, if I remember correctly. Very weird. A legend. Can't you ever check out the 1611 edition? Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a side discussion there between you two. Let's see. Just trying to go here. SoCal Preston says, where were the books laid up in the temple? Or was it supposed special place? That's a really good question. Josephus doesn't tell us. I have no idea. I don't think it would be in the sanctuary, unless it's like a metaphor for the commandments were laid up, or the commandments, of course, were in the Ark of the Covenant, which would be in the Holy of Holies, and there was a kind of a phrase in antiquity. You can see this with St. John Damascene and others about the scripture being laid up in the ark, or not laid up, but in the ark. Although I don't think it's referring to the Ark of the Covenant, though. So I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm not sure where it would be laid up. Maybe in the area where the priests hang out. I have no idea. He doesn't tell us. And Johnny Pedrosa says, is this a Protestant YouTube channel? Because I'm Catholic. I'm looking to see how you think. Yeah, this is Catholic. We're Catholic Orthodox friendly. And basically, this channel is dedicated to the issue of the Old Testament canon, which Catholics and Orthodox accept as Deuterocanonical books, inspired canonical scripture. Protestants reject as Apocrypha, as do Rabbinic Judaism. So that's what it is wall-to-wall discussions on the issue of the Old Testament canon. So, hey, welcome aboard. So you're within good company. Let's see. After I heard my professor talk about Enoch, I found it wanting. Spent a few months trying to chase down Jamnia in the 90s and was disappointed. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that myth of the Council of Jamnia has been floating out there. And Catholics bought into it too. And unfortunately, it was one of those theories that was discarded and still kind of lives on a little bit on the popular level. I don't think people really use it much today. I'm surprised Steve Christie doesn't use it. Let's see. And it was tough chasing down stuff in the 90s because the internet was kind of in its infancy. So you don't have the same stuff that we used to. Okay. Love the team streams. You and William are like Canon Avengers. So thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I love them too. It's a lot of fun. And we enjoy it. And we enjoy the low-hanging fruit episodes as well. It's because you guys get to experience what we experience on a daily basis, just running across all these really, really bad arguments. So the next team stream, God willing, will be Friday. I can't tell you the time. I'm assuming 2 p.m. Eastern. That's usually when we do it, but that's subject to change. No computers, all dead trees in the library. Yeah, I hear you, my friend. It was tough. Like when I was writing Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger, that was all done traveling downtown Detroit to Sacred Heart Major Seminary and just living in the basement seminary library, which is a phenomenal library. And that and also spending hours over a hot copier, copying everything I could get my little hands on and ordering books from Abe Books or Abe Books. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Hi, Gary. Quick question. On diaspora and Hellenistic Jews, are you aware of Jerusia? They were Greek Jews council who kept the writings, which over time cultivated the Septuagint. False. That I've never ran across that, or if I did, it slipped my mind. I would probably say false, just because you would, if that were true, it would be everywhere in the scholarship, and that just doesn't sound familiar at all. Plus, the Septuagint didn't come out of the diaspora. That's the other problem. Septuagint was, well, according to legend, it was copied in Alexandria, but ultimately it has links with Palestine. Question. So the First Council of Nicaea, Constantine was right, caused all the idolatry and stuff, right? Oh, you're too funny. You're too funny. It's so early over here, Sam, that it took me a second to figure out what in the world you're asking. Yeah, I know. Boy, there's just so many myths that surround Constantine. Oops. Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, this is actually, I need to, Johnny, this is a Catholic live stream. We're Orthodox friendly. We're Protestant friendly too, because there are Protestants that accept the Deuterocanon. And so if you're new to the stream, you might not know that so-called Preston. He's actually Protestant who accepts the Deuterocanon. In fact, he's going to be debating a Protestant this Saturday on the so-called Apocrypha. So, and we're going to do a watch party here if you want to join us. So many evils, yeah. Okay. SoCal. I asked because Epiphanius says that they were stored into the actual ark, which wouldn't make sense. It had not returned to the temple. Yeah, exactly. SoCal, that's what I was talking about. Like Epiphanius, John of Damascus. I think Tertullian also. He talks about the books laid in the ark. And I don't think he's talking about the Ark of the Covenant there. There is a feature in the synagogues where they would have a special compartment for the Torah scrolls, for the sacred writings. And the container, the closet in which they keep these scrolls, is also called an ark. And I believe, this is my own personal theory, I think I've seen a couple of scholars mention this theory, but my take on that is I think it's actually talking about the synagogues, that basically it's not accepted in rabbinic Judaism, or it is. And so it's actually talking about that feature in, it's an actual archaeological feature of synagogues. And we could trace it back to the 2nd century, I think, through archaeological digs. Because you're right, it wouldn't make any sense with the Ark of the Covenant, because the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there in the Second Temple period. So it's a kind of metaphor. Just scanning through by the way, as I scan through here, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, so you'll be notified when we're on next. Okay. Koenig said that might have been a Jerusia in the Elephantine Temple. And I hear a different Jerusii, but I don't think I've heard of it in this sense. Yeah, same here. That would make sense if it was the Elephantine Temple. But yeah, I don't, that's what I mean. Thinking in terms of the Septuagint, I don't think I've ever heard of it connected with the Septuagint. Hey, Justified Janice is in the house. God bless you. Welcome aboard. Yeah, the gang's all here, folks. Gang's all here. And then some. So, yeah, don't forget, please subscribe, like, hit the bell. If you want to support the ministry in other ways, we have memberships. I am going to unleash for members only, God willing, by the weekend. I'm going to start going through some of Christie's book, Why Protestant Bibles Are Smaller, and show you some of the shenanigans that goes on in the book. It's going to be a lot of fun for members. So if you want to support the ministry, you can become a member, maybe give some membership to people you think would be interested in this kind of discussion. Also, William Albrecht and myself are on Patreon. We have Patreon goodies as well. And we appreciate your support because it justifies all the time we do with research and putting these videos together for our families so they don't yell at us because we're always gone. Apocalypse. Indiana Jones probably knows the answer. Ha ha ha. That would be a good thumbnail. Yeah, that's funny. I actually do have an Indiana Jones thumbnail, by the way. Give me a second here. Let's see if I can find it. In fact, I was thinking about using it for today's thumbnail. Where are you? Oh, here it is. Here we go. Oops, that's today's. And remove. There we go. So, yes, this is me figuring out where the books were laid up in the temple. So, although I think that's the wrong Indiana Jones, though. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I get all the Indiana Jones different episodes mixed up. Hellenistic Jews, elders. Okay. Yeah. We don't know a lot about the diaspora. It's amazing how little information we have of them. And Daniel says, hey, Gary, what's the difference between YouTube membership, Patreon membership? I'm deciding which one to get. Oh, thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. Well, basically, to be a YouTube member, every Sunday I come on and I'm going to make this available for our patrons as well. But my patrons are members, so a lot of them are at least. So I come on every Sunday and we just open it up to talk about anything you want. So we talk about movies, we talk about whatever interests you. We talk about apologetics. And of course, we talk about canon stuff. So that's like every Sunday afternoon. Plus, every week or so, I give a members only video out, usually looking at something in depth that, yeah, it's like something I wouldn't want to put on the public channel. Like, looking at Christie's thing or talking about other issues like errors in Judith. I think that was the last one. So you have access to that. And it's only a few bucks. Patreon supports me directly. And depending on what level of contributions, you get like a bunch of ebooks. You also get access to a Bible study I did on the Book of Wisdom and all updated stuff like, what's going on in my ministry, my life, my different books that I'm writing, things like that. And like I said, I'm going to also try to get the Patreon members to do the Sunday discussions as well. So basically, you get a bunch of free ebooks and stuff on Patreon and some exclusive material. And for members, it's just like one Sunday morning meeting that you can ask anything and maybe a exclusive video like weekly. I try to do weekly. It's tough though, because right now I got 2 book projects I'm trying to finish. I'm teaching middle school, high school apologetics, and I'm starting my parish Bible study. And yeah, I just got a lot on my plate. Yes, ark storage in synagogues was big. The Jews were martyred. Yep, being wrapped in Torah scrolls. That's why they think Akiba was martyred. Yeah, they are huge. So they had these special compartments for storing these giant scrolls. And they're called ark. In fact, today, you go to a synagogue, you'll see a kind of wooden closet that they keep the scrolls in. That's called the ark. And it's very ancient practice. So I think that's where it came from. It was just a metaphor that they weren't laid in the ark, meaning the rabbis didn't have it in the synagogues to read publicly. It'll probably never be Sunday, even if I switch to YouTube membership. I don't even start coming home to service till 2 or 3 in the afternoon at Texas time. Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe I'll try to vary the time for Sunday to accommodate, because I know some other people too. It's not a good time. It's just like it's the only time I can come here and join you guys. Prefer a proper book. I do too. I do too. The only thing, but there is one advantage for an ebook is you can search it, and that's really helpful because, especially for books that I write, because they're usually pretty heavy and have a lot of facts and stuff in them. For apologetics, you might want to look up something quick. If you have an ebook, you can search through it super fast, find the answer. Where hard copy, a proper book, you can't. But on the other hand, a proper book's great because as you're going through trying to find passages, you can stumble upon things you may have missed, or I don't know. It's always fun searching through books, hardcover books, hard print, because I discover all sorts of things. Where ebooks you don't, because you're scrolling so fast you don't see it. Okay, just going through the chats real quick. Got a lot of cool discussion, by the way. Why would rabbinic Jews hold Rabbi Akiva in high esteem and follow his canon despite following a false Messiah? Well, rabbinic Jews, rabbis make mistakes, and there are Jewish history, rabbinic histories, even before rabbinic history, there has always been false messiahs. And some of them actually unleashed horrible destruction on certain Jewish communities. So Akiva is not really different. I mean, he's one of the earlier ones that followed a false messiah. See, the thing is, he's so pivotal because he's the one that started collating all the oral traditions that become ultimately part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the core for rabbinic studies. You have the Mishnah, then you have the Gemara, which is a commentary on the Mishnah, and then you have the Talmud, which is a commentary on all of the above, and other rulings and legislations. That's probably not a very accurate description, but that's so the Mishnah is really at the heart of rabbinic studies. And since Akiva, historically speaking, from rabbinic documents, they point to Akiva starting that whole process off. That's why he's so important. He also is an important figure because, yes, he chose the false Messiah, but he also saved Judaism by making it a religion of the book. He transforms Judaism. So rabbinic Judaism, in my humble opinion, really owes its birth mainly to this figure right here, Akiva. And so, that's why he's prominent. And once he standardizes a text, that becomes the norm. It takes a while for that norm to kind of filter out to the diaspora. But once it does, it's the norm. There's still continues to be discussions on certain books because, some books were, the sacredness was doubted, like Esther. So you still have discussions about Esther after Akiva, but I think the die was set because, not only do you have a standardized Hebrew text coming out from Akiva, but you also have the Aquila Greek translation that was used to replace the Septuagint. And it's kind of like once those two enter into circulation, begin to be used, it's almost like a fait accompli. It's very hard to ignore. It really does become the norm. Okay, sorry, I just saw that one. But great questions. Well, it worked for your time, not ours on that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you have a life. No, I mean, I try to be flexible because I can't tell you how much I appreciate guys And also, I learn a lot from the chat room. I said this a couple of times. I'll keep saying it. I think our chat room is among the most educated and articulate chat rooms out there. You don't find this quality of chat elsewhere. So kudos to you guys. Should do a Q&A at chill stream time. Well, I try to do that, James, at the beginning of each chill stream like I'm doing now. It's just usually I do it until the questions and comments start dropping off. Then we do the lesson. So, but warning though, it's 4 a.m. here in where I am. My brain is not completely awake. So it's a little dangerous for me to be doing Q&A this early in the morning. That just shows you how long I've been looking at this material. I could do this half asleep. Normal bookcases in-house, etc. were often closed lock boxes with inner shelves. Yeah, that's true. Gary, ever thought of getting your books into logos? See, that's I did. See, the problem is some of them are, I have a few books that are published through Catholic Answers Press, so they own the rights. So it's up to them to get into logos. And initially they started doing that, but I've noticed that they haven't done it in quite a while. So all of my books like Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger and Hostile Witnesses, and I don't know what else did I publish through them, Revolt Against Reality, it's up to them to get into logos. And then I have one book, and my next book is going to be from Emmaus Road Press. They do logos a little bit. I don't know if they ever will put my stuff on there. And then the others, there's a few that I self-published just because, like my book, Making Sense of Mary, every publisher turned me down. They all had the same reason. We already have books on Mary. So it's like, yeah, but mine's kind of a unique approach for Mary. But they're like, no, it doesn't make financial sense. So I just published it myself. Actually, I take that back. That originally was published by Grotto Press, but Grotto Press had to close its doors. So now I own it. So I put it up there. I probably could get logos to do, the books that I self-publish just to keep them in print. But tell you the truth, those books, I don't know if they would be really handy with logos. And by the way, also, since I have the original Word docs for the manuscripts of my books, and Logos they used to have a real robust system. Now that it's kind of neutered, but I turned them into personal books. So I actually do have them on my Logos. I have almost all my books on Logos, but that wouldn't help you guys. Love both hard copy and archive. Yep, I do too. As you can tell, I mean, this is the small outer section of my library, which is probably around, I don't know how many thousands of books, important books. I won't both dead trees. Yep. Let's see. Regarding Akiba, forlorn hopes are things too. There's still Jacobites in the UK, even though Prince Charles lost. Charlie lost. That's funny. Yes, there still are Jacobites. That's interesting. Yeah, I think Akiba has been seen by Jews as a hero. Yeah, he's a martyr too. So, and by us as a herald of an antichrist. Yeah, it definitely fits. Him and Bar Kokhba fit the false prophet and beast scenario. He can be both and honest intentions. Yeah. If I were Akiba, I didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah or Christianity is true. If I was Akiba, I would have probably done the same thing he did. I don't know about Bar Kokhba though. But it's, I don't know what the situation on the ground was back then. Akiba's the Jewish Pope regarding the canon. No, actually, no, he wouldn't be the Jewish Pope because the Pope doesn't have authority to do that. Um, yeah, Akiba. See, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I've seen it in scholarship. So my current theory is, once the temple's destroyed and Jews cannot function as a cultic religion, offering sacrifices according to the old covenant. You had to make legislation to deal with this whole new situation that's there. And so you need a lot of flexibility, but you can't just make it from your own authority because no one really has authority. No one rabbi has authority to make such rulings. So what Akiba did is he needed something scriptural, but he needed scripture to speak the things that it doesn't speak to. So he came up with this interpretive way of reading vast, weird interpretations into, eccentricities in the Hebrew text. And that was the limitation and exclusion method. But in order to do that, you have to have a single Hebrew text. And so it's like a consequence of that is, since Judaism didn't have a single authoritative standardized text, there were several texts in circulation. He adopted one as the norm and then used that as a kind of Procrustean bed so that whatever's denied within it is affirmed and whatever is outside of it is rejected. That's what I think went on with Akiba. Now, a pope couldn't do that, right? That's way too much authority for a pope. So he kind of, he was kind of the leader. He was the head rabbi in Jamnia at the time, which was the center for religio-political thought, Jewish thought. So he is very, very influential. But I wouldn't say pope because that could give a misunderstanding that popes could one day wake up and say, hey, here's a new canon. Apocrypha Apocalypse. Didn't Akiba prohibit the reading of Sirach or something like that? I thought he went so far as to say that they read it, yet could not enter into the world to come. It wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, there's actually a few passages where he seems to do that. I think he says whoever reads the outside books do not have a share in the world to come. And then later they said that includes Sirach. So I'm not sure if there's a direct statement where he speaks to Sirach, but yeah, there was an early prohibition. What's interesting is despite that early prohibition, Jews continued to use Sirach in spite of that. And so there was a nuance that was introduced that, well, you can study Sirach, but you can't study it deeply like you would an inspired text. And so that's how they reconciled the prohibition with the ongoing study of Sirach. But for SoCal and myself, and maybe you guys, it's like if this book was never considered sacred by any Jew, why would they keep using it in spite of the injunctions against it? Right? That seems to suggest that it was considered sacred by some Jews, who knows how many, um, and that minority kind of took a while to die off, but they continue to use it because they believed it was sacred. Yep. Okay. So that's the same. It's hard. Sometimes this scrolls, sometimes it doesn't. Yep. Mm-hmm. Suburban Banshee, right? Yep. Man, hopped and skipped my two modes. Oh, Jamesy, I did. I'm sorry. This thing doesn't scroll. So I have to manual scroll it, and sometimes I jump over things. Is it this one? Messianic Judaism is Protestantism at its finest. It is. It is a form of Protestantism. And I think they make no bones about it. None of them had the seat of Moses. Um, yeah. Okay. Apocrypha Apocalypse. I'm sure the Jews try to understand this since they read First Maccabees during Hanukkah. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. No idea. Well, for them, they downplay Hanukkah as like not important at all. Some of them just think it's like a Jewish Christmas, something to celebrate. So they don't feel left out when Christians are celebrating Christmas. So they really try to downplay the Feast of Hanukkah. This one of the end results of Protestantism. Okay. When you take Judaism as your guide too seriously. Yep. Yes, indeed. Which is a shame because there's brilliant people. And, thank God that they accept Jesus as Messiah. But it's like, boy, if they understood Catholicism or Orthodoxy and seen the Jewish roots of our beliefs, I think it'd be a much better fit than the Protestantism. But, there's that autonomy that they can choose how to worship however they want to worship and decide what is and what isn't binding. That's a lot of power. Where if you join the Apostolic Church, you're bound to what Jesus and the apostles handed on. Catholicism is the best. Yeah, James, I agree. But I agree. Anyway, I think we're done with this was a really good, I really enjoyed the discussions, guys. We have to move on. Let's see. Let's go to the lesson, shall we? Because actually we have a bit to get through. And I want to just lay this out for you. Oh, wait, hold on a second. This is interesting. So Antonio says, I used to be a Messianic Jew. They pretty Catholic and don't realize it. Yeah, just don't have the seat of Peter and magisterial council. Yeah, they don't have all the sacraments though. But yeah, it's just what they don't understand is the apostolic faith is the fulfillment of Israel's hope. It is the fulfillment of Judaism. And so they're still unfulfilled Jews. They don't know it. They accept Jesus Messiah, which is huge, but they don't want to be disciples of the disciples of Jesus. It can't prove their own beliefs without destroying themselves. Well, you got to be careful there because Orthodox and Catholics overlap doctrinally quite a bit. I think there are some areas, James, that you're right, but not as a whole. Yeah, Protestants definitely. Far, far more. Yes, no sacraments too. Right. Okay, guys, let's jump into the material today. Hoo-hoo! All right. And I want to begin by summarizing Justin, what we did with Justin Martyr. For those who haven't seen that chill stream, I'm going to do a couple of summaries actually before we get into the Bryennios list, which I think is really important because we have to understand the list. Since there's so little that we know about the list, it's important to kind of get an overview, context, historical context to maybe fit the list into. And here's my little handy dandy chart that I'm going to be using for a little while until we get into, the 3rd century. This is kind of a summary of what we outlined before about the stages of the formation of the rabbinic canon. And so what you have is 4 columns. On the left is early church fathers. Next column is approximate dates. 3rd column is Roman emperors. And then 4th column is important events that happen roughly within this timeline. So the timeline runs from top to bottom. And so what you have is the stabilization of the Hebrew text roughly around 100 AD. Then you have the Apostolic Fathers. There's a revolt in the diaspora, which is very interesting. Then you have the rule of Hadrian. And it's during his reign that Akiba begins his collation of the Mishnah. And of course, you have the Bar Kokhba revolt. And it's during that time that I think Akiba adopts this standardized text. The Greek Aquila text is made from his standardized text, so it's used as a replacement for the Septuagint. Then the Bar Kokhba book, the revolt is crushed, 135 AD. You have the Hadrianic persecution, which, guys, is hair-raising. It almost wiped out Judaism. The Jews barely survive this horrible revolt because of this false Messiah. And Judaism essentially stops functioning for a while because of the persecution. So it isn't until Antonius Pius that it seems roughly around his time that the Hadrianic laws are rescinded or tempered. This allows, like Rabbi Meyer, a very important figure who lived outside of Hadrian's persecution, to return to Usha, which was where Jamnia moved during the persecution. And then when you get to the 139, 140, that's when the anti-Jewish laws are taken away. 140 or 150, the Sanhedrin is reconstituted in Usha. And this is where I think the norms that Akiba started back in the 130s is now starting to be promulgated outside of Judea. And basically what I'm going to be laying out in these chill streams, I'm going to show why I think this is the case. So the Sanhedrin is reconstituted. And then after the reconstitution, we have Justin Martyr, which we talked about last chill stream. So check it out if you haven't seen it. You have with Justin, we saw that he recognized the rejection of the Septuagint and the replacement text that was there. We also find him that he restricts the Old Testament text he uses against Trypho the Jew to only those that Trypho accepts. And that's an important move, I think. So you can see Christian apologetics trying to hone in their apologists or their text they're going to cite to those that are held in common with the rabbis. And then probably around 170, 175, we have Melito, Sardis, and possibly the Bryennios list that we're going to talk about today. And again, as the norm is heading out into the diaspora, it isn't until about 200 to 220 AD that we have Barita Baba Bathra, which is the first rabbinic list that survives antiquity. And it's the first of other things too. And that's also very influential. Regenerate Zed said, I have a question. Well, throw it up in the chat room. And unless you want to talk to me on stage. And if you do, the link is up there. You can join us. And just go to the private chat when you come on board and just let me know your religious affiliation and what the question is. And if I can answer it and it fits in, I'll be glad to discuss it with you. So here's the summary for Justin Martyr. First, he is an early witness to the persecution of Christians during the Bar Kokhba revolt. So basically, all the Jews joined in the Bar Kokhba revolt, except for Christians, because after all, Jesus said false messiahs will come. Don't join them. And they didn't. And it's a good thing they didn't, because they would have been wiped out. Justin also alters his apologetics against Trypho, explicitly recognizing that there are texts that are no longer accepted by Trypho's teachers. And this might account for the absence of deuterocanonical citations in Justin Martyr's dialogue with Trypho. He also recognizes that Trypho's teachers made a replacement Greek text, and we see that here in this quote. And although Justin was well aware of Trypho's beliefs and his predecessors' beliefs, he shows no awareness of a supposed cessation of prophets, that the prophets ceased to appear in Israel after Malachi. So this is something that Protestants will appeal to, is this supposed cessation of prophets or prophecy after Malachi, and therefore they claim the Deuterocanon could not be scripture because it's written during this no prophet period. Actually, Justin Martyr not only doesn't seem to see a cessation of prophecy, but believes that prophets continued in Israel until the death of Jesus. So then it's transferred to the Christians, and this becomes kind of a Catholic belief. You can see this later fathers as well, although some place it at John the Baptist, others place it at death of Jesus. And yes, the sons of Zadok. You're right. We know during the Maccabean revolt, there was a usurpation of the seat of Moses. They're right. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls community. Could be that these scrolls were kept by our Lord for 2,000 years. Wait. Yeah, I'm not sure what your question is. Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that. It seems that the Dead Sea Scroll community believed that they were continuing the authentic practice and the authentic calendar. But the books they accepted aren't, they accepted some books that a lot of people don't, like First Enoch. Although Sirach and Tobit were there, they didn't accept Esther, or at least there's no fragments of Esther. So I don't know if you could say, like, Jesus adopted the Dead Sea Scroll thing. I don't think you have to go that route. I think it's sufficient to say Jesus is God. He knows which books he inspired, so whatever he handed down to the church is inspired. That's the route I take. But that's an interesting thought. Also, so that's our recap of Justin. So these are very important data points. Moving on. Now, guys, we did a really extreme in-depth look at Melito, Sardis, and his list. I'm not going to recap it here. Just go to Apocrypha Apocalypse, type in Melito, check it out. I go way in much depth, but I'll give you a summary because it's been a while since we did this. First, who is Melito? It appears that Melito was a Jewish convert to Christianity. And here's a text, one of several scholars who believe that. And Eusebius preserves a fragment. Well, all we have is one sermon he has on the Passover or the Pasch and fragments. And one of his fragments has a list that's preserved in Eusebius's church history. And we went into this in depth on the video. Basically, Eusebius is getting this quote from a book he wrote called Extracts. And Eusebius says that the same writer, given in the introduction, a catalog of the acknowledged books of the Old Testament. And the word acknowledged is used by Eusebius elsewhere for agreed upon books. Okay. So I think Eusebius is kind of telling us that what Melito is doing is he's making a list of the books that are mutually received by Christians and Jews. And that would fit in with what we saw with Justin Martyr and kind of the other history I laid out. What he's doing is he's taking quotations from the law and the prophets regarding the Savior and all our faith. In other words, this is an apologetics manual. And he's basically coming up with proof texts to prove to Jews that Christianity is true. Now, it's interesting that this whole list comes about because of Onesimus. Onesimus asked him can you please give me an accurate list of the ancient books, how many there are in number, and how they're arranged. So Melito goes east. He travels east, apparently to Judea, right? Or Cappadocia at this point. And where these things were preached and done, and he accurately learns the books of the Old Testament. Now, what's interesting here is he calls Onesimus his brother, which in antiquity usually means a fellow bishop. So we have two Christian bishops, okay? We don't know where Onesimus' see was, but obviously Melito's in Sardis, right? Which has a very large Jewish community. Now, why is it that a Christian bishop doesn't have a clue which books are being read in the church? Does that make sense? How can you celebrate a liturgy if you don't know which writings to read at the station where you read writings? Because the most ancient Christian liturgies riff off the rabbis, or the rabbinic, or not rabbinic, but the Jewish synagogue liturgies. And Jewish synagogues always had a station for the reading of scripture. So Christian liturgy always had a station for the reading of scripture. So you have to know which books to read, right? So he inquires to Melito, which books are those? Now that doesn't make any sense, right? And notice also, he's not asking for a Christian list. Why? Because he only wants the Old Covenant. He doesn't want the New Testament list. If this were, let's say he was ignorant, he didn't know which books were to be read in the liturgy, they would certainly want to know the New Testament books, right? But that's not what he asked for. He asked only for the Old Covenant. He wants these extracts to be made, and he wants a list of books. So clearly, I think this indicates that what's going on here is he's writing an apologetics manual for Christians to evangelize the Jews. And just like Justin Martyr, he realizes you have to use the material that we both hold in common. And what this implies, actually, if this is true, is that Christians and Jews, or rabbinic Judaism, have two different sets of books. So much for the oracles of God argument, right? So, so here's all the summarizing points. And then I point this out. This is important. It's actually found in Philip Schaff's work, Ante-Nicene Fathers. And in the footnote, he writes, the nature of this work is clear from the words of Melito himself. It is a collection of testimonies to Christ and to Christianity, drawn from the Old Testament law and prophets. It must therefore have resembled closely such works as Cyprian's Testimonia and the Testimony of Pseudo Gregory, and other anti-Jewish works in which the appeal is made to the Old Testament, common ground accepted by both parties. See that? Common ground accepted by both parties for proof of the truth of Christianity. Now, the analogy I always give is I'm a Catholic apologist. If I'm arguing with a Protestant, I'm going to cite the books that we both hold, if we both mutually accept. And I might even draw up a list for fellow Catholics, if they're going to dialogue with Protestants, a list of the books that Protestants accept. Okay. But my list doesn't mean that I accept this as the canon of Scripture. It means that Protestants accept this list as the canon of Scripture. You see the difference? And I think this is what's going on here. So the list it gives really isn't what Melito accepts, but it's the books that Melito found when he traveled east that the Jews accept. And one clue to this, not only because it's only the Old Testament that Melito has, but the other clue is that Melito omits Esther. And Esther is famously disputed within Rabbinic Judaism. It was one of those books that barely made it into the Hebrew canon. It was considered just a kind of a secular history. And so even Beckwith realizes that the omission of Esther likely comes from rabbinic disputes. So, and Esther is famously, like I said, here's all the stuff about the weakness of Esther. There is no copy of Esther at the Dead Sea Scrolls. Hebrew Esther doesn't mention God or acts of piety in general, like Greek Esther does. The sacredness was disputed by the rabbis. By the way, Esther is not quoted in the New Testament. Esther is often omitted or singled out in Christian lists when they attempt to reproduce rabbinic canon. And although it is positively received by Christians, starting with First Clement, like we talked about on our earlier chill stream. And by the way, when it is accepted, it's almost always the Greek Esther with the expansion, right? With the sections that Christie had difficulty with. James says, I know what contradiction in Alexandrian Esther Steve Christie speaks of, the presence of God. Yeah, that's pretty funny. I would explain that to you guys, but it takes too long. There's other things too, by the way. So Kel, you got it right. Yeah, if you want like a short crib note summary of the Protestant case for the Protestant canon, that's basically it right there. Yep, perfectly summarized, my friend. All right, so the other thing I want to point out is Melito's list actually doesn't square with the Protestant canon for obvious reasons, right? First off, it omits Esther, which all Protestants accept. And then there are 3 books, there are proto-canonical books that are omitted in the list, like Lamentations, Nehemiah, and Esther, right? And also some books may include other books as well, like Jeremiah could also include Baruch and the Epistle. And of course, he could have expanded Esther, you could have expanded Daniel. And there's the possibility, I think a very strong possibility, that he lists wisdom, which I think is actually Sirach, amongst these books. And what you see here in this slide is something actually I think I actually accidentally omitted when I did the chill stream before. But I think this is Melito's list, basically. And what I found is he uses the genitive plural as headers. Okay. So I have those in red. So you have the English on the left, the Greek on the right. And I think this is how he lists the books. So he has of Moses 5 books, and then he lists 5 books of Moses, then Joshua, Judges, Ruth, of Kings 4, of Paraliponum 2, of Psalms, then it's David, which is to stipulate the Psalms of David, not like the Psalms of Solomon. And then he says of Solomon, he has Proverbs and the Wisdom, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. And the big fight is whether it's and the wisdom or even wisdom. See, Protestants will say or argue that when he says and the wisdom, it's actually an alternative title for Proverbs, because Proverbs was sometimes called the all virtuous wisdom. That's what Protestants will say to avoid having the Deuterocanonical Book of Wisdom or Sirach in this list. Yes. Yeah, and I'll point that out, actually, SoCal. But I did on the chill stream, too. It's actually, in the early church fathers, they call them the all virtuous wisdom. But anyway, then you go on Job, and then it says of the prophets. So you kind of have a header. Now, he breaks his pattern here. I'm not sure why, but he has of Isaiah, of Jeremiah, of the 12 in one book. Now, I would be tempted to say that there's more than one of each of these, but which is possible for Jeremiah. Like I said, there'd be Lamentations, maybe Baruch in the epistle. And of course, the 12 minor prophets are one book, so that's plural. There's more than one minor prophet in this category. But the problem is of Esther doesn't make sense. Or not, excuse me, of Isaiah doesn't make sense because there is no Deutero and Tertio Isaiah back then, right? Then he has Daniel, Ezekiel, Esther. No, they have Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. I tend to think wisdom in Melito refers to Proverbs, even though I love it to be Sirach or wisdom. Well, if you, Koenig, did you see my stream on Melito where I argue for Sirach? I personally think it's Sirach. And for the following reasons. First, the Greek, it could be and the wisdom, which would mean a separate book, or it can mean which is wisdom, which would make it an alternative title. The critical text here shows that there are variants, although the preferred reading is actually as a separate book, but it's very close. The Greek construction doesn't fit. I don't agree with that. So actually the preferred reading fits and the wisdom. Oh, did I include it? No, you're right. That's a typo. Thank you so much. Yeah, guys, I did this right before the chill stream, which I shouldn't be making slides at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Thank you. On the bottom, it says Esther. I meant to put Esdras or Ezra. It's not Esther. Thank you for pointing that out. That was a big boo-boo on my part. Actually, I did it at 2 a.m. Yeah, it's Esdras. But anyway, the construction, actually, the preferred text is and the wisdom, which would make it a separate book, but it's close and it's minuscule. It's just a question of whether there's a dash there or not, or a little mark. So a copyist could very easily make a mistake, as pointed out by Sokel. And this is noted also. So here's the alternative argument by F.F. Bruce. But as it's pointed out by Toy, the all virtuous wisdom is also used not only for Proverbs, but also for Ben Sira and wisdom. So it doesn't necessarily mean Proverbs. It could mean these two books. And I think the biggest problem is Melito gives, if you figure out how he computes these books, he comes out with 21 books, which most Protestants would say that's wrong. He's got to be referring to 22 because the Jews only had a 22 or 24 or 27 book computation. So there is no such thing as a 21 book computation. And that's why I think is also a strong indication that and the wisdom must be a book different than Proverbs, because if you do that, then that means that there's actually 22 books that he mentions, which would square with rabbinical tradition, where if it's an alternative reading of Proverbs. You only have 21, which is weird. So, hold on a second. He doesn't use the article generally. He adds Kai. That's true. But he does use the article. Actually, that was Mead and Gallagher's point, that he only uses the article there. But that's not true, though, because he uses the article when he says the 12 prophets. The 12. So he does use an article for another book in the list. And this is the only place he has Kai. But that could be because, in fact, it's right here. If you look in the lower right-hand corner. Okay, guys, you can talk amongst yourselves if you don't know Greek, but it has Proverbs and the wisdom. Now, that actually points to, I think, as an indication that there's something about Proverbs and wisdom that needs differentiation. That's why he uses the Kai. In other words, it could be Proverbs of Solomon and the Proverbs of wisdom or something like that. And I don't know if I have a slide. No, I don't have a slide. But in my chill stream, so you might want to check this out. Who am I talking to? K-Nick. Check out my chill stream on Melito, because what I point out is Jerome had a copy or was familiar with Hebrew Syriac, and he said that Hebrew Syrac's name is Proverbs. And I think what happened was, when he was consulting with the rabbis, if they had Syriac, you would have something weird, because you would have Proverbs and Proverbs in Hebrew. So there would be a need for disambiguation, because both Proverbs of Solomon and Syriac have the same Hebrew title, namely Proverbs. So I think that led Melito to try to differentiate Proverbs from and Proverbs and wisdom or Syriac. And that's why he uses the Kai. That's my theory. I'm sticking to it. And like I said, it also gives you the added bonus of making Melito align with the 22 book computation, which is kind of standard for rabbinic computations. Yeah. Yeah, I think that for me, once I saw that, it's like, yeah, this has to be Syriac. I don't think it could be Wisdom of Solomon, because it's a Greek document, right? Wisdom is one of 2 deuterocanonical books written in Greek. And it doesn't have a very good reception within Rabbinic Judaism. But Syriac has incredibly strong reception in Rabbinic Judaism. So it would make sense that you would need that disambiguation, and it would make sense that early Judaism would likely accept Syriac. Yeah. It's just isn't the construction I'd expect, but it is a strong point. You're right. And you're right. It does stick out like a sore thumb, because that's the only place he has Kai in its entire list. But like I said, I think there was that need for disambiguation between Syriac and Proverbs, because they both had the same Hebrew titles. And so that's why it's like it's placed underneath Proverbs, because it's associated with Proverbs in some way. And of course, even literary genre, that would also associate the two. Okay, guys, you can stop talking amongst yourselves. Sorry for that side discussion. But Koenig, I love the way you think, though. And I feel you, man. I mean, those were the same points I had. But when I looked more into it, especially when I found out when Jerome says that it's called Proverbs or parables, which would be Proverbs in Hebrew, it's like it all clicked. For it to be the second book, I would expect it before the article. No, well, not necessarily. I don't see where that would necessarily be the case. And in fact, sorry guys, we're getting off on a side. Okay, now I don't want to spend any more time on this because I'm going to lose everybody. But if you look at the variants here, notice Chi. Let's see. The preferred text is E Chi Sophia. That's the first one highlighted in yellow. And then you have where is that? Chi. Oh, there you go. And then the fourth one, you have yellow, green, yellow, yellow from left to right. That the fourth one has Chi before the epsilon. So there actually is variance as far as where the epsilon falls in relation to the Chi. So, but like I said, we're dealing with minutia, and we're also dealing with it through the hands of Eusebius, which also makes it a little bit more tenuous as well. Yeah, it is arcane, but it's important though. So yeah, Kainek, if you check out my chill stream with Melito, I go into this more in depth, and I think I also did this for Sam's show. So Sam Shamu might have us, where I reply to Anthony Rogers, and I kind of go through it there too. Yeah, this is an ongoing joke, guys. Don't get messed up on that one. Let's see. Regenerate Z says, okay, I feel like I led exactly I needed to land because I've been questioning the canon. I'm Protestant, and I need a starter course. Where do I begin? Start with the chill streams, my friend. Just go on our channel. I don't know if I labeled them chill streams, but just go through all the early morning chill streams we have here, and I go through New Testament. And I'm basically what I'm doing is chronologically unpacking all this stuff. So just do that. Just all the live chill streams that I've done. They usually have the funny thumbnails, usually, and just start from there. Just go through them, and at least I'll give you my perspective on Deuterocanon and of why I believe it to be so. So, you didn't answer my question, Gary. Oh, were you serious? If Proverbs is also wisdom, is it Alexander Bell say? Yeah, I got it. It's funny. Um, obviously it's Hellenistic wisdom literature, right? Even though it's Hebrew. That's funny. Thanks. I have a copy of the 88 book Ethiopian Bible. Any warnings? Yes, they have too many books. All due respect to the Ethiopians. Too many books. And they also have non-canonical. I mean, the Ethiopian Bible is an outlier. No one has anything approximating that Bible. And a lot of the stuff there is just solely Ethiopian origin. The New Testament's very different. I'm sure it'd be interesting to read that stuff. I haven't read it, but because it's outlined, there's so much more to read. So Syriac is Palestinian, yeah, definitely. They have too many books. Just like Amadeus. You guys remember that old movie? The prince says, too many notes. Just take out a few of the notes and it'd be fine. Yeah, that's true. That's what I found too. Okay, guys, let's move on to the Bryennios list. I don't have a lot of blazing insights to this because there's just so little that's known about it, but be glad I'm going to share with you what I do know about it. This is a nice summary. It's found in the Codex Jerusalem, basically. And this is from Timothy Lim's book. The Bryennios list contains 12 lines of folio 76a of manuscript 54 of the Greek Patriarchate Library of Jerusalem, inserted between the second epistle of Clement and the Didache. This copy of the Jerusalem manuscript is dated to 6564 of the Greeks, or 1056 CE, but its origin of the list Audet traced back to the first half of the second Christian century or earlier. It is unknown who compiled this list, but Audet argued that it was used by Greek-speaking Christians who derived its originality from a Jewish source, which that last line I think is important. So basically, Bryennios discovered this little section that was put between Second Clement and the Didache. It's a list. Basically, we know when the manuscript was made. It's at the turn of the first millennium. We just don't know when this list was made, who it's from, or even what it's meant to represent, although it appears that it's written for Greek-speaking Christians because it's in Greek and it transliterates the Aramaic into Greek letters, and it uses the Greek names for the books. So, yeah, it seems to have a Jewish source and a Christian audience. Dating is all over the map. I just want you to know this at the outset, and we're going to talk about this later. Audet says it's first half of the second Christian century or earlier. You have F.F. Bruce, who's uncertain, perhaps as early as Melito, 180. Then you have Lee Martin MacDonald, who says it's either second century through the 5th century, probably the 4th. That's because this list has a lot of similarities with Epiphanius's list. Beckwith says it's older than Epiphanius. And then finally, we have a recent study by Stevens, who claims the list comes from the 7th century. Now, this is an incredibly wide range of dates, as you can tell. I mean, it could be as early as the beginning of the 2nd century to as late as the 7th century. So that tells you exactly where we stand as far as solid knowledge on the Bryennios list. Yep. If we don't know what the list is for, what they think canon is, and the end is achieved, it really is hard to use. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Exactly. So that's why I don't put a lot of emphasis on this list. So there must have been lists. Now this is Lim. Lim says there must have been lists like the Jerusalem manuscript in circulation among the Christians in Asia Minor that were creating confusion and that led Onesimus to seek clarification about the state of the Old Testament canon. So here Lim is tying this to Melito Sardis, and he says there must have been lists like this that was causing confusion. I don't agree with that. I think the confusion was we weren't sure which books were newly adopted by the Jews. And so Christians were trying to ascertain which books actually are the officially accepted books. And that's why Akiba had to travel east to get the authoritative scoop on what's the rabbinic Bible. Among his requests for the extracts of passages from the Old Testament sections of the Law and the Prophets that testify to Jesus, Onesimus asked Melito for, quote, accurate facts about the ancient writings, how many there are, the number, and what order. The fluidity of canonical list is presupposed in Onesimus's request. Again, Onesimus doesn't mention any other list, right? So Lim is kind of, I don't know, it sounds very artificial to me. He keeps saying that all the confusion is because of a list. I think that's backwards. I think they drew up the list because they're trying to ascertain what it is. It could only prevail before the establishment of Origen's influence in Palestine and in Greek-speaking countries. Okay, so basically he says Lim believes this is like a list that came from the time of Melito. So here we have, and I think there is some weight to that argument. because here's that outline we did at the onset of the chill stream where I traced the history. And if Akiba is the one that established the rabbinic canon, we have this area between Akiba and Melito with the orange bracket. And within that, you see the Hadrianic persecution, reconstitution of the Sanhedrin, and then you have Melito Sardis right after that. So that's, I think, where the rabbinic canon begins to be promulgated officially, coming out of the Sanhedrin, reestablished in Nusha, right before Melito. So I think actually Melito went east to find out, what was this norm in Usha. Is it true Enoch didn't make it because the Jews already taken it out of the Jewish canon, and only because it lent too much credibility, only because it lent too much credibility to Christianity? No, I think the reason is because First Enoch never was included within what's called the Masoretic text, the Hebrew text, and it wasn't included in the Septuagint either. And so when the rabbis adopted their norm, it would naturally not have been included. That's how I would answer that. So it wasn't even on the radar screen. Okay. So anyway, so it makes sense that the Bryennios list could very well be from roughly around the period of Melito. I can see where that would work. But hold on to that thought, because there's other evidence that it may be actually quite late. Okay. Now, why do people push this list back? It's because of the book order. So here's a basic rundown of the book order on the Bryennios list. It says the order of books is notable. The first three books, the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, follow the attested sequence, right? Like we always do. Then it's followed by Joshua, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, in order that is otherwise unattested. So it has a weird thing with the Torah. It's noted above, Melito's list inverts Leviticus and Numbers as Numbers and Leviticus. So Melito kind of does something similar, but not quite as radical. Two other canonical lists, the Mumpson African Catalog, or the Cheltenham list, it's also known as, and that of Leonidas of Byzantium, agree with Melito's inversion of the third and fourth books of the Pentateuch, but none follows the Bryennios order. Okay, so it's unique. And here's an interesting theory that he gives for that. An ingenious solution was suggested by Peter Katz, that the anomalous order was caused by a mistaken, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that this early, it basically means ox turning, a bidirectional reading of sequence of lines likened to the plowing of a field. Thus, the copyist read the Greek of the first line, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, from left to right, and then end of the first line, the scribe copied the order backwards because he is now reading for the second line from right to left. The second line was thus mistakenly copied as Joshua, Deuteronomy, Numbers. Katz's solution is supposed by Epiphanius' list, with which the Bryennios list shares the common tradition, which connects the sequence in the usual order of the Pentateuch books. Yeah. No, that's all he says about it, Kynick. Yeah, I think that's really fascinating too. It makes a lot of sense, actually, because otherwise it's just doesn't make any sense. No one else ever did that before, so it couldn't possibly be telling us about a real situation on the ground as far as book order. They are scripture writers. I'm not sure what you're asking here. Yeah. Yeah. And Jude famously uses First Enoch and cites it formally as prophecy. And we've gone over that on the channel too. So if that interests you, we've done a few programs on Enoch and Jude and all that other stuff. Now, what does the Bryennios list represent? Now, guys, I think this is actually a picture of the Bryennios list from the folio. But like I said, the Greek there is so weird. It's really hard for me to make it out. But I think this is it. At least I know for sure. The last line says the Didache of the 12 apostles. And this is supposed to be sandwiched between the end of Second Clement and the Didache. So I think this is it. But it was really hard for me to make out what's there. But anyway, the title is the names of the books by the Hebrews. Okay. So clearly it's trying to reproduce the names of the books that the Hebrews use for a Greek audience. Now, F.F. Bruce says, is this list of the names of the books of the Old Testament that are given in Aramaic, transcribed into the Greek alphabet, and in Greek? 27 books are listed, so it gives the 27 book computation with Esther at the end. Now, notice what Bruce does. Okay, in order to make Bryennios into a Protestant canon, he has to make a number of assumptions. So he says, if 1st and 2nd Esdras is Ezra and Nehemiah, and Lamentations is included in Jeremiah as an appendix, then these 27 books are identical to the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, as usually reckoned. It is difficult to account for the bizarre order the books are listed. The list reappears in revised and tighter form in the trees of Epiphanius, 4th century Bishop of Salamis in Cyprus. So notice he has to assume that some of the books there mean certain books and not other books, but that's purely an assumption, right? Because Jeremiah could include Lamentations, it probably does include Lamentations, but it could also include Baruch and the Epistle. And as far as Ezra's 1 and 2, that could be Ezra and Nehemiah, or it could be the Greek Ezra and Ezra and Nehemiah in one book. So a lot of assumptions there. Yes, it doesn't look ancient in my opinion. The manuscript's in great condition. I have a hard time thinking 17 plus years old, plus or minus. Yeah, no, this is it comes from the Jerusalem manuscript, which is dated at the turn of the first millennium. And this does come from the Jerusalem manuscript. I'm just not sure if that's the actual text of the list. I think it is. So it is ancient as far as it being like 1,000 years old. But it's not ancient like 2,000 years old. And we don't know where this list came from, too. That's the other thing. Now, SoCal, if you're talking about like book order or something like that in the list, then okay, yeah, I agree. It's too weird to be ancient. Yeah, Jerusalem Codex, right? Okay. So anyway, guys, basically what they're saying is there's kind of an affinity between the Bryennios list and Epiphanius's list. Epiphanius has 4 lists, an incomplete list as well. And this is from Roger Beckwith's book, Old Testament Canon, New Testament Church. The far right column is the Bryennios order. I'm sorry it's so small, but this was the only way I could fit it all on one page. And yeah, Esther is there. That is correct. And those are the other lists. So you can see there is a kind of similarity with Epiphanius. And this is why Lee Martin MacDonald and others, and also Roger Beckwith, believe the Bryennios list actually dates to the 4th century, not the 2nd century, because it has this kind of affinity with Epiphanius. Okay. I think since it's talking about Hebrew, it would be the godless Esther. Okay, moving on. And this, he just goes on to comment about book order. The books of Ruth, Job, Judges, and Psalms, in that order, come after Numbers and before the historical books. There is no good explanation for this order. Audet describes the order as haphazard and characterized the list as a particular example of early freedom. The order of the historical books for 2 Samuel, for 2 Kings, with 1st Chronicles attested by Melito and Origins list. The order of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs is similarly attested. Audet asserts that the prophets as a whole are grouped in a recognizable way, but no other list agrees with the sequence of Jeremiah, 12 minor prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and 1st and 2nd Esdras. The order of Jeremiah before Isaiah agrees with Baba Batra, but the insertion of the minor prophets between them is anomalous. Melito's list has a similar grouping of the prophets, but not in the same order. Esther completes the enumeration of the Old Testament at the end, just as does Origins and Jerome's lists. And by the way, the fact that Esther is at the very end could be a signal that Esther was dubious. It doesn't prove it, but usually things tacked on at the end are the last to be accepted. And I don't have to go over this. I don't know why I have that slide in there. So this brings us back to dating. Like, it really does come down to dating, because where it falls within the history will determine what exactly is it meant to represent, and if it even has any weight in far as discussions on the canon, right? So we looked at that Audet, which Timothy Lim interacts with a lot. First half of the second Christian century. I think that's plausible. It makes sense within that historical period, that time of flux where the new canon, the new standardized rabbinic Bible is being promulgated. Christians are trying to ascertain what that is. It would make sense in that period. Then you have Bruce, and he's uncertain. He thinks it's also Melito. McDonald says somewhere between 2nd and 5th, so he sees it before Epiphanius, but not quite as early as Audet, or maybe as early as Audet. And that's because of it looks a little bit, has some similarities with Epiphanius. So who's dependent on whom, right? So is Epiphanius dependent on something like the Bryennios list, or is the Bryennios list echoing what Epiphanius says? We can't be sure. Beckwith thinks that the Bryennios list is actually echoing Epiphanius, so he places it after Epiphanius. And then we have Stevens, and Stevens is worth quoting here. This is a recent article put out by the Journal of Theological Studies in 2020, and it's argued by Luke Stevens, and he makes his case. He actually places it way back to just a few hundred years before the Jerusalem manuscript was made. And this is how he argues. He says the crucial piece of evidence, however, has long been overlooked. The Doctrina Patrum, hereafter DP, a florilegium composed around 700, contains a canon with strong resemblance both to the Bryennios list and Epiphanius. So there's this later list that looks a lot like the Bryennios list and Epiphanius list. He says, since it also quotes the surrounding paragraphs from Weights and Measures, it undoubtedly is an excerpt from the same work. Comparison of the three lists makes it obvious at a glance that the Bryennios list actually stems from the Doctrina Patrum, which occupies a middle ground between the other two. So he actually thinks that the Bryennios list comes from the Doctrina Patrum, which is a 7th century document. And the 7th century document is obviously quoting from or expanding on Epiphanius. Which, if that's true, then yeah, this is a very, very late document and actually has nothing to do with early development of the canon. So I'll just throw that out there, guys. You can think about it. You can read the article and come up with your own decisions on it. Maybe Esther was recreational reading meant it as comedy. I don't think so. I mean, maybe. It depends. Would you categorize books outside the canon as recreational? I don't know. Koenig says, given the lacuna it has for a Protestant canon, could even the early date make it useful? Even early, it has been regarded as garbled. That's true. Scroll up. Even Godless Esther was Deuterocanonical. James. Okay, so there you go. It's like it's all over the map as far as dating. Like I said, I have sympathies for the early 2nd century. If it seems to fit the genre and everything. But I get all the other ones are, I think, just as valid. And Stevens, I'm not sure. I would have to see how scholars interact with Stevens and push back on him. But if his theory holds true, then really the whole Bryennios list thing is a flash in a pan. It doesn't really have any bearing on the development of the canon. But like I said, I think, but it does fit that time period with Melito pretty nicely. Okay, so the purpose of the list. Why was the Bryennios list put together in the first place? Well, Aramaic transcribed in the Greek alphabet, Greek names, and the Greek header, the names of the books of the Hebrews, suggest that the list is meant to inform Greek Christians about the newly received text of the rabbis. That would make sense if you have the early date, right? And that would make it align with Melito Sardis' attempt of reproducing the rabbinic canon. So like I said, there's a nice parity there if the date is early. Or if it's late, it's just an eccentric list based on some older source like Epiphanius. So it really doesn't matter. So dating is very important. Contents. Bruce's suggestion that Ezra equals Ezra and Nehemiah and Jeremiah equals Lamentations only. But it could also include Greek Ezra. It could include Baruch epistles as well. And Esther being placed last could be a sign that was disputed, but it doesn't necessarily mean so. Yeah, what do you make of that? I don't know. So like I said, I think it would fit very nicely within our schema of my proposed, I think this is actually how the canon unfolds historically for the first couple of centuries. So assuming that it's authentic, assuming that it's early, I have no problem with it. If it's late, I have no problem with it. Then that's why I don't put a lot of emphasis on this list, because there's just too many unknowns, too many question marks. And I'd rather wait and see what scholarship shows up, whether somebody can push back on these things or see where it all falls. Okay. Let's see. James says the fact that the list, Melito's list, Athanasius list, destroys Protestant arguments for shorter and mutilated canon, in my humble opinion. Yeah, I think so. But it's only if you try to figure out when the world these lists are trying to represent. Once you do that, the basis for the Protestant canon really evaporates. Oh no, I pulled a Gary and forgot saint. Yeah, how dare you, James? How dare you? Are you implying he's not a saint? Tisk tisk. Pulling a Gary. Come on. Give me a break. Well, I'm dealing with all these I'm dealing with Protestant scholarship. A lot of it's liberal, and you come up with stuff like that. The CE things, for example, right? They don't, obviously, they're not going to put saint before names anyway. You did the reverse. Yeah, I try to. I try to shake things up on the chill stream just to keep people awake, keep you motivated. All right, guys, we're done with the lesson. I think we're done with questions. Really good questions and discussions, guys. This is a lot of fun. And it's time to end the chill stream as we do on this channel. I want you guys to have an opportunity to flex to the people out there that you survived a chill stream. And to do that, we have a secret word that if you want to flex, you can put it up on the chill stream and show everybody you made it to the end. Oh, no, not at all. Appreciate it. The video, sorry for, no, you didn't derail it. Not at all. It was a good discussion. Definitely check out my treatment on Melito and see what you think. Yeah, secret word, saint. Yes, since this is a hot controversy, that's an excellent suggestion, guys. Put saint in the chat room. Show everybody you made it to the end, and pray that we all become saints. All right, we are saints, but let's be saints in heaven. All right. Okay. Don't forget also, please, if you haven't subscribed, please do hit the bell, tell people about the channel. Let's grow the channel. Let's get some visibility out so we can get all this information out to people out there so that they can have all the facts when they're looking at, well, is this canon, this Bible that I have, does it have all the right books? And till next time, the team stream, God willing, will be Friday. We're going to have William, David, and myself. We're going to finish up our part 3 of dissecting needgod.net and Steve Christie's low-hanging fruit. So next time, guys, I hope everybody has a great day and a great evening and a great morning. All right. Talk to you later.